Good morning, dear colleagues, dear ambassadors, your excellencies, distinguished guests, distinguished professors, distinguished colleagues and friends. We are very happy to welcome you all here on our international conference, which is dedicated to the interests of Ukraine in Asia, which is dedicated to analysis of how the Asia can be of interest for Ukraine. It is our honor to welcome here ambassadors of the Republic of India, of the Republic of Korea, of Japan. It is our big honor and pleasure to welcome here the representatives of diplomatic corps, namely from the embassies of the Asian countries, Kazakhstan, Islamic Republic of Pakistan, People's Republic of China, Embassy of the Republic of Malaysia, Embassy of Japan, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, Republic of Indonesia, Republic of Vietnam, Republic of Uzbekistan. It is also our big pleasure to have here with us our academic colleagues from Asian states, namely Dr. Zhang Yanlu from the Institute of Russian, East European and Central Asian Studies from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, and Professor Sheshatri Chari, member of the Governing Council of the Research and Information System for Developing Countries Institute from India. To start our conference, we would like to have several welcoming addresses, welcoming words, and the first welcoming words come to Professor Dr. Valery Kopyka, Director of the Institute of International Relations of Taras Shevchenko National University of Kyiv.
Excellencies, distinguished guests and colleagues, the Institute of International Relations is happy to welcome all of you today for a very important discussion, interests of Ukraine in Asia. We live now in a vulnerable world with rapid changes and new challenges. In this changing scenario, one trend should be examined separately, and it is a rise of Asia. 21st century is widely recognized by international relations scholars as Asian century because of many factors: geopolitical position, resources, demography, a rapid economic development, rise of military potential, and technological evolution. Asia is actually reinventing itself into very powerful actor in global stage, and this happens during the last 2 decades within the process of globalization. As Asia is understood as the center of gravity of global economy and politics, many Western states already adopt the pivot of Asia strategy. Ukraine, being the biggest European state at the same time, could not stay away of this global trend and also should pay more attention to relationship with Asian nations. So, the main objective of our conference is to raise the interests of deeper and constant research of Asian states' policy, economics, and international conduct, to attract the attention of state officials and to launch new mutually beneficial projects. With the aim to provide some precise steps and present our vision, we would like to discuss the possibility to set up a center of Asian research at the Institute of International Relations. The reason to establish such a center is the increasing interest both among the professors and students to this part of the world. Also, it is important to notice that our students have many options to learn different languages, among them Chinese, Turkish, Japanese, Hindi, Farsi, and others. We are grateful to embassies of many Asian countries for their support and really appreciate the possibility to provide the exchange and to send our students to the partner university in India, Japan, other Asian countries, also Iran, Kuwait. Our understanding is that the establishment of the Asian Research Center will promote more active diplomacy toward close collaboration with Asian nations. Today we hope to discuss different areas of this cooperation and to listen to the High Representative of Asian States in Ukraine. I wish the event all the success and fruitful results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The next welcoming words go to Mr. Serhiy Petukhov, Deputy Minister of Justice of Ukraine.
Excellencies, colleagues and friends, I'm happy to be here today. Actually, my position in the ministry is called Deputy Minister for European Integration. And European integration is indeed the focus of my work, but not only. And my responsibilities cover international relations and specifically international legal cooperation with all of the world. And of course, Asian countries are an important focus for my portfolio, for my ministry as well. The conference is called the Ukrainian Interest in Asia, and I think our interests are mutual, they are pragmatic. It all starts with business, investment, and trade. And Asian markets have traditionally been the focus of interest of Ukrainian companies. We have traditionally had agricultural export, aviation industry cooperation, armaments, and many other areas where we've had mutually beneficial trade since quite a while. We now see a lot more of Asian investment coming to Ukraine. Again, something that benefits both the countries that invest and Ukraine as well. And where business goes, there you have legal problems. So that's where the Ministry of Justice is there to assist our businesses and our partners in our cooperation and making sure that the investment is protected, the trade is flowing freely without any problems. And I can say that in the last years, we've been quite active cooperating with our Asian partners. Just this Sunday, I'm leaving for Kazakhstan to negotiate 2 treaties on mutual legal assistance. We've had recently treaties concluded with Malaysia. We've had a visit of the Minister of Justice of China. We are also involved in the Silk Road initiative that China is promoting to bring the new tradeways in the globalized economy. Another area where we think that the cooperation with the Asian countries is important is security. I mean, the security threats are global. It doesn't matter where you are. Unless you cooperate, at some point of time, you can face a problem which you cannot resolve on your own. One example that comes to my mind is the downing of Malaysian Boeing over the non-government controlled territory, and a very unfortunate event that underlined that the threats are global and we need to cooperate globally to address these threats. So I think that having more connections between Ukraine and Asian countries, having more understanding, more exchanges, people-to-people contacts will enhance our cooperation, help us to understand our cultures, legal systems, and needs better, and will open, and this will open us to each other to make sure that we have, more tourism, more investment, more economic ties. And that, of course, is always to the benefit of both countries involved. So I welcome the participants, and I'm happy to be here for a while, answer any questions. Please come to contact me or ask any specific questions if you have something that is related to the Ministry of Justice work in Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Petukhov. We are really thankful to have you here today with us. And a welcoming address also goes to Mr. Vadim Kovalevsky, Deputy Head of Directorate General for the Asia-Pacific region, from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine. Mr. Kovalevsky.
Thank you. Dear Mr. Director, Excellencies, distinguished guests, let me express my gratitude to organizers to take part as an honorary guest in this conference on such important topic nowadays, and my appreciation for giving an opportunity on behalf of the Ministry for Foreign Affairs of Ukraine to deliver a welcoming speech before such a distinguished expert community. Contemporary Asia is an environment with multiple driving forces. China, Republic of Korea, Singapore, Japan, India are mainstreaming current world development. Thus, realization by Ukraine of its foreign policy at the present stage requires appropriate patterns of relations with each countries in the region. Asia, with its growing human resources and economic strength, today determines and influences the whole world strongly, and it was recognized since the Obama's policy known as a pivot to Asia, and nowadays it defines mostly the international agenda. When one determines the priorities of Ukraine's cooperation with the Asia-Pacific region, it's necessary to look deeply into a number of important political and economic factors. It is worth noting that Ukraine's relations with the Asian countries have a significant and till now untapped potential for development, which makes it possible to talk about them as an important and promising direction for foreign policy of our country. In this regard, an important feature of Ukraine's relation with the Asia-Pacific region is growing multiple vector cooperation, and during recent years, the political dialogue has been intensified significantly at all levels. It should be underlined that investment cooperation of our country with Eastern and Southeast Asia countries is gradually developing. The greatest interest of Asian investors in agriculture, infrastructure construction, energy saving, besides the cooperation between Ukraine and individual states of Asia in the military technical spheres is actively developing. Taking into consideration the global leadership of the region regarding the development of the latest terms of information and the telecommunication technologies, the cooperation between Ukraine and the countries of the Asia-Pacific region in science and technology is very promising. In addition, I would like to point out that diplomatically, Ukraine is represented in the Asia-Pacific region very broadly than at any other continents except Europe. We have 17 embassies in Asia, covering up to 40 countries. Expect that this conference will be a significant contribution to understanding the need of a holistic approach and policy towards Asia-Pacific region. Availing this auspicious occasion, I would like to wish all participants fruitful and exciting discussion, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kovalevsky. It's very important to have you here with us. Thank you very much to have Ministry of Foreign Affairs, specifically the Directorate General, which works in this direction. Of course, it is very important and big honor and pleasure. Dear colleagues, now we are moving forward to plenary session 1, where we will talk in broad about Asian century and the interests of Asia. We will start right now. We have approximately an hour and a half to work in this session. We will have a coffee break, of course, around noon. Then we will continue our work with another plenary session. And to start plenary session 1, I would like to pass the floor for a brief introduction regarding our today's conference to the main ideologist and main organizer of our today's conference, our institute's, I would say, leading researcher and professor in Asian direction, Dr. Olena Burdilovska, Associate Professor of the Department of International Relations of the Institute of International Relations of Tarasa Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. Ms. Burdilovska, please.
Thank you so much, and I'm really very, very happy that the Institute of International Relations hosts so many friends and colleagues from different Asian countries today. My responsibility is not to present something very scientific, let's say. My mission today is only to provide the introduction and to launch the discussion on Asian century. That's why I will only mention some interesting facts and figures about Asia. First of all, we would like to start with that fact that since the very beginning, the 21st century, as was mentioned by our director, is the period of extremely high availability when humanity faces great challenges. And the big question in our time is a simple one: should we be optimistic or pessimistic for the future of humanity? And the world's response is divided when many Western societies are drawn in pessimism. By contrast, the rest have never been more optimistic. And this represents a reversal of previous centuries' pattern, where the West was always, at least for the last 2 centuries, more optimistic. Asia now is basically the ark that is searching for prosperity. Why is Asia becoming slowly confident enough to believe it will be in the vanguard of the progress in the 21st century? Really, in terms of economic growth, social changes, global engagement, and eminent leaders with modern vision, Asian nations now should be estimated as important actors which are already forming a new international order. And that's why we estimate Orientalization is one of the most important global trends, and we remember that the West now represents only 12% of world's population. 88% live outside, and the most populated part of the world is Asia. But unfortunately, instead of constantly trying to retain control of the world, the West should learn to share power. Unfortunately, it does not happen, as was said by the most famous, maybe, promoter of the of Asian century, professor of Singapore University, Kishore Mahbubani. When the West celebrated the fall of Berlin Wall and the end of the Cold War, it missed the return of Asia at the same time, when China decided to rejoin the world economy in the 80s, and India did so in the 90s, and then others also started to revive, but the West did not notice. Return of Asia to the global affairs is understood as a logical historical process. Also, the globalization inspired Asian nations and pushed them to provide crucial changes and represent themselves globally. One more factor is, of course, history. That's why we call the process Return of Asia, because it is a cradle of the mankind and the land of Asian civilization where the most important inventions have been made. And that's why Asia is proud of this civilizational wisdom. Again, one more factor to mention here is that Asian population is equivalent to almost 60% of the total world population. Almost half of this population is urban, and the median age in Asia is only 30 years old, means Asia is very young. Asia is poised to enter a historical sweet spot, said Kishore Mahbubani again, with 3 of its most populous countries, China, India, and Indonesia, led by strong, dynamic, and reform-minded leaders, Xi Jinping, Narendra Modi, and Joko Widodo. When we are talking about demography, does not work. Roman, можете глянути. Yes, thank you. The population is increasing, and we may say that in some countries like Saudi Arabia and Iran, for the last 50 years, the population became 3 times bigger. In both countries, more than 75% of the population is urban. We have also very young nations in South India, and especially in South Asia and in India, we have 356 million young populations, and that's why India has the world's largest youth population, but also in such countries like Pakistan, in Central Asian states, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, the median age is only 26 years. One more thing is the middle class in Asia is increasing, and as per Brookings' estimation, 88% of the next billion entrants into the middle class will be in Asia. Economic growth, some important and famous factor is that Asia looks to play an increasingly important role in the global economy when 3 from top 5 leading economies are in Asia, China, Japan, and India. The biggest trade area in the world is here, and the experience we already have, like Japanese miracles, then miracle on the Han River in South Korea, Singapore's story from third world to first. And that's why we have so many optimistic forecasts for the future. Let's see some only numbers. In total, GDP growth in Asia in last year, 2017, was more than 5%, when we know that in Europe and especially in Western Europe, it was less than 2%, sometimes even less than 1% only, with some countries which have more than 7% of GDP growth. Economic forecast, that's why is almost about prosperity of Asia, because this March will be led most probably by 7 economies, 2 of them already developed and 5 fast-growing middle-income emerging economies like People's Republic of China, India, Indonesia, Japan, Republic of Korea, Thailand, and Malaysia. It's only the one estimation. Of course, we have many of them, but almost all of them are very optimistic about Asia. Then let's see the foreign policy and the international behavior, conduct, traditions, multilateral diplomacy, when we have principles of peaceful coexistence, non-interference, mutually beneficial collaboration, when we have active participation in so-called diplomatic clubs, starting with G20 and then also other formats like BRICS, and even MICTA represents mostly Asian countries. Then we have diasporas as a linking bridge. We have tolerant and multicultural societies, and that's why we may say that Asia have now realized that it is counterproductive to permit or to allow disputes to turn into differences, and differences to become conflicts. In many cases, it chose dialogue over conflict. One brilliant example of the cooperation and integration is ASEAN project. After 50 years, now, today, there are 625 million people live in the territory under ASEAN, which east to west stretches the same distance as between Lisbon and Moscow. And we know that the decision-making process, implementation, and many different forms of integration, famous ASEAN way, became really a very bright example how to cooperate with each other. Real politics, let's mention that 6 from 9 de facto nuclear powers are in Asia, 5 from top 10 biggest armies are here. Many Asian countries have their own space programs. They create very good informational technologies programs. They spend a lot of money for modern research and investigations. And also the increasing budgets on weapons and military equipments. We know that 2 largest world's importers of weapons are India and Saudi Arabia. Asia also possesses a huge potential of soft power. There are only some pictures to remind you, starting with ancient cultural traditions up to the modern cinema and pop culture. That's why Asia has also become more and more popular. And finally, why Asia, and where is the question in Ukraine? Here we see the future, as was mentioned before by the representative of the Minister of Foreign Affairs. Pivot to Asia was famous strategy which is already adopted, not only by the United States, by European countries, Russian Federation, and every global actor actually has this strategy, and Ukraine is just searching for the same situation because Asia is actually reinventing itself into very powerful dynamics. It's a huge market for Ukraine, and Ukraine should adopt its own policy focused in Asia because of all this reason. But the special attention, I believe, should be given to the informational policy. As the people in Asia have no clear understanding of the situation in Ukraine, do not know that much about our potential achievements, culture, and actually, if we will discuss what Ukraine will propose to the world, it is a wide range of opportunities, and our sunflower is only the one example to be mentioned here. So with this, I would like to thank, and I can't wait to hear to our high representatives from different diplomatic representations in Kyiv. Thank you very much. And
Thank you, Professor Bordilovska. Again, this conference is mainly her idea. So this pivot to Asia and this issue of cooperation with Asia, deepening of cooperation of Ukraine and Asian countries is, of course, of much importance for Ukrainian country, Ukrainian society today. So we really hope that today's conference would be a contribution to this issue. And now I have a big honor and pleasure to pass the floor to His Excellency Mr. Manoy Kumar Bharti, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of India in Ukraine, with the topic India-Ukraine relationship, win-win situation. Your Excellency.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Chair, for giving me this opportunity. I welcome the guests from all around the world and mostly from Asia and other participants of the seminar. I am actually thankful to Professor Dr. Olena Bordilovska for giving or laying down the foundation of this seminar, because it makes my job very easy. I can say that with this background, I am presenting you a case study of India as to what India can do for Ukraine. Keep in mind all the background that Professor Olena Bordilovska has given you. And if we start with that, let us first see what India and Ukraine have connections or common, which can be seen as a win-win situation for both our countries. And if we, does it work? Okay. If we go to the map of India, you can see that Ukraine and India both have very ancient roots. I read somewhere recent archaeological findings that people have found that about 3000 to 4000 BC, there was a civilization here, or there was a population here which used to speak almost the same language as our ancient Indians spoke, close to Sanskrit. And surprisingly, even today, there are a lot of similarities between Ukrainian language and Indian Sanskrit language. But you see, since ancient times, India has been known as a country of wisdom and wealth. Both wisdom and wealth. The reason is that, and one of the indicators of that is that India is the only country in the world after which an ocean has been named, Indian Ocean. There is no country in the world after which an ocean has been named. Now, if you see, India has been traditionally always a wealthy country. As late as 1757, when we consider that British colonialism finally took root in India, India's share in the world trade was more than 12%. In 190 years of British colonization, in 1947, when India got independence, India's share in the world trade had reduced to nearly 0.01%. So you can see, from being one of the richest countries in the world, we got reduced to one of the poorest countries in the world. Now, fortunately, in the next 70 years, the stability, the democratic practices, and economic progress made it possible for India to achieve this status of world's fastest growing large economy today. It's not that we are saying this, IMF, World Bank, and other credit rating agencies are saying this. And today, in 2017, our share in the world trade has risen down to nearly 2.4%. As IMF and World Bank and other people predict, India is expected to continue to be the fastest growing economy for the next 10 years. And if that happens, we are expected to be very close to this figure of 12% in the next 10 years. Now, I think this is not really working, but if you see, Vadim, the bilateral trade figures are not in this. Okay, if you see the country as such in India, this, you see 29 different states in India, and each of these states is having a different language, history, culture, cuisine, classical dance form, music, and everything else. I keep saying it is as if 29 different nationalities are living under one nation's banner. And also that what European Union intends to be in 50 years from now, India has been showing as an example to the world for the last 70 years. The moment the name India comes in front of anyone, the first image that should come in mind is a land of diversity, where diversity is not only lived, but it's celebrated to that extent that it is the world's fastest growing economy today. And that is in stark contradiction to many other countries where a little diversity creates a big problem. We have 22 official languages in India, 22 official languages written down in the constitution. There are countries where if you have 2 official languages, people kill each other. That is the diversity which we are talking of. And in the population, today India is about 1.25 billion people, but people forget the scale with which we are talking of. 1% of Indian population is 12.5 million people. It is more than the population of nearly 100 countries in the world. And if you see, we add 22 million people every year into our population. It is like adding half of Ukraine into our population. The question is, should people in Ukraine be laughing at this figure or ridiculing this figure or taking advantage of this huge and rising population of India? Professor Olena Bardolovska told you about the population, 60% of world's population living in Asia. But just take an example of India. 1.25 billion people adding 22 million people every year. Now, how does Ukraine take advantage of this huge and rising population of India, which is progressing at an amazing pace? You just saw one of the graphs, one of the figures in the last presentation, where India is shown as having the largest middle class population, 380 million. And just again taking that as an example, I'll give you a few instances as to how this huge and rising population of India can be used by Ukrainian population and government. Out of this 1.25 billion people, 30% people are as rich as Americans or Europeans, and they are potential tourists in the world. When Indian tourists go abroad, they don't travel with backpacks. They really go to outside for having fun with family and friends and children. Indians are supposed to be the second largest spenders as tourists. So if Ukraine only concentrates on 0.01% of this touristic population of India, Ukraine will get 37,500 tourists from India every year. And if on an average these tourists only spend $1,000 per head, then Ukraine will earn $37.5 million just by doing nothing actually, just opening your gates to the Indian population. Fortunately, this started happening in April 2017 when Indians got visa on arrival facility. And I'm glad to say that border control statistics show that there is already a huge jump in 2017 for people who are arriving from India. In 2016, nearly 19,500 Indians came to Ukraine, but in 2017, 29,500 people came from India to Ukraine. This has also opened another interesting aspect. Indian Bollywood film industry has started coming to Ukraine to shoot films in Ukraine, and that is an unimagined advantage, because in many countries in the world where Indian film industry has gone and shot a film, tourism to that country has increased nearly 10 times within 2 to 3 years. And we expect Ukraine to be there in the same scene like Mexico, New Zealand, South Africa, Brazil, Argentina, and people from India will start coming to Ukraine, especially from this summer. Please mind my words. Okay, next example, 1.25 billion. Professor Bardolovska also told you that there are 324 million people within the age of 10 to 24, and that is one of the reasons that India is the youngest country in the world in terms of young population. Now, all these people, young people, which is about 325 million people, according to Professor Olena Bordelovska, are supposed to be getting education, skills, and jobs. We have huge number of institutions and universities and other educational centers in India, but that's not enough to take care of 22 million babies born every year in India. And that is the reason many young people after school come abroad or go abroad for higher studies, and Ukraine can be one of the best such destinations. Already, there are 11,000 students from India are studying, which makes India the provider of largest number of foreign students this year. Each student spends nearly $5,000 on tuition fee, lodging and boarding, and personal expenses. That means Ukraine is already earning $55 million just by providing education. But considering the potential that you have of the young population, according to me, this number is nothing. According to me, the ideal number of people, students from India studying any time in Ukraine at any particular point of time should be nearly 40,000. And if that happens, you can imagine Ukraine is going to earn $200 million just by providing education to Indian students. And the third example is, can I have the next slide, please? It's not really working properly. Almost 1.25 billion people are eating mostly vegetarian food. I am an Indian, but I am a non-vegetarian. But it does not mean that I eat most of my meals, lunch and dinner, with fish, chicken, or meat. Most of my meals are vegetarian. Once in a while, when I get a non-vegetarian food, I don't say no, I eat it. That is why I am called a non-vegetarian Indian. You can understand this, that most of these 1.25 billion people are mostly using vegetarian food. And the most important source of protein for them is pulses. India imports nearly $3 billion worth of pulses every year. And it can be one of the most important imports from Ukraine. We import nearly half of this $3 billion worth of pulses all the way from Canada. Ukraine has a better agricultural land, better climate. It is less than half the distance from India. This can be one of the most important exports from Ukraine for India. And the question that I always raise, why not Ukraine for export of pulses to India? This is the right time to have an overview of India-Ukraine bilateral relationship. In 2017, the total bilateral trade, many people will not realize, is nearly $2.8 billion. It makes India Ukraine's 9th largest trading partner. Out of this, Ukraine's export to India is nearly $2.28 billion, which makes India the 5th largest export destination for Ukraine. And if you see the trade balance, Ukraine has a positive trade balance over India of nearly $1.67 billion. And that way, India is the 2nd largest trade surplus country for Ukraine. It is a substantive amount and very important trade partner for Ukraine already. And this figure is expected to grow in the coming years. The other point is the democracy in India. Ukraine is a 25-year-old democracy. India is a 70-year-old democracy. Today, if we have elections, there will be 850 million registered voters in India. The 2nd largest democracy in the world is USA, with a total population of 350 million, number of registered voters as 210 million. Indian democracy is nearly 4 times larger than the democracy in USA, which is the 2nd largest democracy. This is just an example to show what diversity means for India. This is the 50 rupees currency note of India. The value is written in Hindi, in English, and 15 different scripts. 50 rupees, 50 rupees, 50 rupees. All these 17 scripts are Indian, and they are recognized in our constitution. I keep saying that if Ukraine has anything to take from India, there is a lot which can be exchanged in terms of our democratic practices and our constitutional knowledge. Because I believe the reason why a democracy, a diverse country as India, has been able to to survive and progress at this amazing pace, the prime reason is the Constitution of India. And there is a very high likelihood that if constitutional experts from Ukraine interact with our constitutional experts, you might find something useful which can be translated into action in the Ukrainian constitution. The last point that I like to make is that we have a huge amount of cultural and other educational interactions and cooperation, about which again Professor Berdylovska mentioned. I also need to tell you that economic progress is not India's final goal. India does not want to be an economic superpower to threaten other countries or other regions in the world, just as many other countries tend to do. India's main goal is to reach that position of a country known for its wisdom and wealth. And economic progress is only the path to reach that final goal. Towards that, we have already started working. You have seen how International Day of Yoga was celebrated in the last 3 years, and United Nations agreed to hold this as International Day of Yoga on India's proposal. India provides nearly 20 scholarships under ITEC scheme for professional training in India for professionals from Ukraine. We also offer about 6 scholarships in cultural areas and Hindi, and we expect all people in Ukraine, professionals and students, to look at the Indian Embassy website to get more and more information about what can be done to make the present level of India-Ukraine relationship more fruitful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. Dear colleagues, and now furthering and deepening the issue of India-Ukrainian cooperation, we will spend several minutes for a very important occasion for signing of Memorandum of Understanding between the Indian Council for Cultural Relations and Institute of International Relations of Tarasa Shevchenko National University of Kyiv regarding the establishment of the chair of the India Council for Cultural Relations in our institute. So I have a big pleasure and honor to invite Mr. Ambassador and Mr. Director here to sign the memorandum, please. Well, now our conference is not only a scientific event, but also making some real change in relation to fostering and deepening cooperation between Ukraine and Asian countries. Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador. Now I have a big pleasure to pass the floor to His Excellency Mr. Lee Yang-go, Ambassador Extraordinary and Plenipotentiary of the Republic of Korea in Ukraine, with the presentation perspectives of the Republic of Korea-Ukraine cooperation. Mr. Ambassador.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my great pleasure to be here with you. Due to time constraint, I have to be in a very, very hurry. Once again, thank you very much for inviting, and thank you very much for organizing very symbolic forum. Indian ambassador has promoted his country a lot, so I have to compete with him as a colleague. As you may be aware, on Korea, we have a couple of symbolic development. First of all, Winter Olympic Game was successfully held this February, and also a summit between North and South Korea will be scheduled this April, on 27th of April. It will be very, very historical event as well. And also, have you been heard about the 50-30 club? This is not existing, but they say informally 50-30 club. 50 means population more than 50 millions. 30 means GDP per capita more than $30,000. So there are 6 countries in the world, and Korea is expecting to join join 50-30 club as a 7th country. So it would be also a great encouraging sign for us. And also, according to long-term forecast done by Goldman Sachs, in the year of 2050, if Korea will be unified, then unified Korea will take 8th place in terms of GDP, and 2nd place in terms of GDP per capita. Why I am talking about our future forecast? So invite Korea as a partner. Korea will not disappoint Ukraine. And there are 3 arguments between Korea and Ukraine should cooperate more. First, seeing I think Korea and Ukraine have a very geopolitical similarity. And secondly, Korea could be a good model for Ukrainian national development. And thirdly, Korea and Ukraine should join together to respond to upcoming fourth industrial revolution. I have a big presentation, but my summary is, first of all, we have to understand the global mega trend, and then I'm going to share a vision and strategy and implementation between Korea and Ukraine, and also result, and finally conclusion. As you may be heard about how to characterize the current world, VUCA is well defining to understand what is going on current world. And I put the 8th global mega trend. This mega trend will affect the current global situation and the future as well. So everybody is well aware: Eurasian integration, climate change, post-industrial revolution, and kind of a post-truth or post-factual is kind of a moral hazard. And food, energy, water resource is also serious current and future problem as well. And also Ukraine has a Donbas conflict, and Korea has a nuclear issue with North Korea. And everybody is talking about return of geopolitics. So we have to establish a common strategy based on global mega trend. I think there are environment and the state task. Both Ukraine and Korea have a similar state task. So we have to, first of all, well respond with the fourth industrial revolution and creating new growth energy source, and creating jobs and enhance competitiveness, and also contribution to national, regional, and global development. And Indian ambassador mentioned, so India is not intending to economic power, but moral and moral power. I fully agree with the ambassador of India. So we have to be value-oriented, and we have to be more future-oriented, and we have to be more global-oriented as well. I have been here for 2 years, and we held 5 times of economic forum and 3 times of a security forum. So we finally concluded Ukraine can enjoy the advantage of a hub. Ukraine can be the hub of logistics and the hub of export, manufacturing, and digitalization. And Korea is the champion of miracle on the Han River, and there is another miracle of Rhine River. Likewise, Ukraine in the future can enjoy the miracle of the Dnieper River. And if I think our bilateral relationship can reach out to the Eurasian level and global level as well, based on a hub of Ukraine in the field of logistics, digitalization, export, and manufacturing. Many people highly appreciate potential of Ukraine. I fully agree with them, but among them, I am particularly highlight Ukraine has most talented human resource, and Ukraine can enjoy geographical ideal location to be the champion of a hub. And we do have a lot of current bilateral ties, but among them, Intergovernmental Commission between Korea and Ukraine will be held next week in Seoul, and first Vice Prime Minister Kyiv will be the head of the delegation. Yeah, there are a lot of potential project or current project under implementation or under negotiation. We are very interested in the medical sector or energy sector, infrastructure sector, agricultural sector as well. And if Korea and Ukraine can join together, I think we can try more bold task. I think Ukraine is really necessary to consider to introduce a free economic zone. And under the free economic zone, you can construct techno park, industrial park, and smart city, what else? So major or ambitious comprehensive development project should be really helpful to drive economic growth of Ukraine. So I think Ukraine can enjoy the center of a hub of logistics, manufacturing, export based on digitalization, and it can further reach out to Eurasia, Middle East, Asia, Africa, and globally. Then we can make visualize. Kharkiv could be second Silicon Valley, and Odessa can be the second Rotterdam. Rotterdam is the hub of logistics in Europe. And I went to Lviv last week together with the Korean business delegation, and Lviv can be medical hub in Europe. I think this is a small island in Seoul, and you have Dukhanov Island. So Dukhanov Island or Kidro Park can be transformed into beautiful island like Manhattan, mini Manhattan. And we have also a Korean Dnieper River, and we made remodeling. So this is the center of tourism, and we are we can prevent drought, and we can prevent flood, as well we can make it a site of tourism. We have more than 1,700 special bike lane along the river. So I think Dnipro can be remodeling. And as I pointed out, we do have a Korean Silicon Valley. So why not Kyiv to claim as a kind of high-tech, the mecca of high-tech? So yeah, Turhanov Island, this is Korean Turhanov Island in Seoul. So this small island becomes the center of business and finance and media and culture. So this is Korean Dnipro River in Seoul. So you can imagine, so you do have a huge chance to develop. Yeah, this is a port of Busan. This is also a global port. Yeah, Samsung Hospital and Korean Disneylander. And Incheon Airport, this is, I think this is the best airport for 12 years. And thanks to Winter Olympic game, we constructed the second terminal, and the second terminal has been opened this year. So again, if this task will be fulfilled, then Ukraine can be the leader in the agricultural sector and digital sector, and what else? I think Ukraine also can be the hub of alternative energy. So we may have a common strategy together. So there are 10 short-term tasks which should be done within this year. As I pointed out, I think the upcoming Intergovernmental Commission would be the milestone. Yeah, implementation mechanism. This is really important. Yeah, we do have a nice, smart vision, strategy, policy, but without implementation, it's nothing. So according to statistics, only 5% of policy or reform can be proven to be successful. So 95% is decided by implementation strategy. So I think if we can join together, and if we can fulfill our mission together, then domestic level, bilateral level, regional, global level, we can enjoy a lot of benefit. So this is a long story to explain. Anyway, we have to open our eyes from bilateral level, regional level, Eurasian level, global level, even future level, even historical level. Our president has very emphasized 3P. So his philosophy is, first of all, yeah, we should be 3P maker. We should be peacemaker, we should be prosperity maker, and we should be people make happy. So 3P is really, how to say, his basic philosophy. I think Ukraine has the same philosophy, so we have to very common language in terms of 3P, and also Ukraine and Korea has a similar geopolitical challenge, so we have to transform geopolitical risk into a geopolitical blessing, and someday historian will call Ukraine as a history maker. So I sincerely wish Korea and Ukraine join together and to make a new history. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ambassador, for this very interesting presentation about our possible cooperation. Dear colleagues, excellencies, representatives of diplomatic corps, sorry for some inconvenience. We will have a brief change of students here due to the educational process. This will go to have lectures and the others will come. So sorry for some inconvenience which you may find during this process. And while we have this change, I would like also to mention that we are now currently having the YouTube online translation with the help of our high-tech team. So everything which is happening right now here can be seen globally through the network. And the next floor goes to, and we are very proud to have here with us Mr. Harada Michio, Charge d'Affaires d'Interim from the Embassy of Japan in Ukraine, and the presentation with the name Development and Challenges in Asia. Please.
Good morning, and thank you very much. The number of students decreased substantially, but I have no intention to compete with the Korean ambassador or Indian ambassador. Today, I'm not talking about Japan, Ukraine. I think I want to put perspective a little bit more than bilateral. So I'd like to share with you some of my personal views, how the situation 70 years after the severe war, Japan started in a way, and we did cause tremendous sufferings on the part of Korean Peninsula as well as China and other parts of Asia. But more than 70 years after the war, I like to take a look. Some professionals mentioned about the rise of Asia. I want you to pay attention to what the Asia's economic weight means to the world. I want to take the example of India and APEC. APEC means Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation countries. Together, India and APEC, in terms of economic weight, it consists of 60% of world GDP. This is more than 3 times of EU. In terms of trade, it's 52.4%. As India ambassador mentioned that India consists 2.54%. This is 1.5 times more of EU. In terms of population, APEC plus India consists of close to 60% of the total world population. This is 5 times more of EU countries. Ukraine is not part of EU yet. Russia is a part of APEC as well as part of G20. It's a fact. The economic weight is coming to Asia Pacific and India. As Indian ambassador pointed very clearly, India, Asia Pacific is the key economic pivotal within the world. This is the very important development after the Second World War II. I want to talk about maybe 3 areas, including Japan. One is the Korean Peninsula. My girlfriend, Korean ambassador, mentioned a lot of developments on the Korean Peninsula. North Korean leader and Donald Trump, they are talking about when they meet and where they meet, what's the important topics. Korean Peninsula is the only area that divided still after Cold War. We really strongly believe denuclearization of North Korea, Korean Peninsula is very, very crucial. Prime Minister Abe is now in Florida with Donald Trump. They are discussing not only bilateral issues, economic issues, but they are talking about North Korea, Syria, Middle East, and Russia, Ukrainian, maybe. North Korea did 60 times under the present leadership of missile test, 3 times of nuclear test. This is remarkable developments compared with the previous leaders. We are concerned and we want to keep our pressure on North Korea rather than more conciliatory to the dialogue. We would like to maintain, Japan together with US, want to maintain strong pressure on North Korea. And of course, we like to see how they are willing to discuss and how they are willing to come up with the complete and verifiable denuclearization of North Korea or Korean Peninsula. So that's one thing I want to share with you. And second is I want to touch about Japan and China. Japan is allied with the US, as you know. We have a security treaties with US. In Asia, we don't have any organization like NATO. It's more bilateral military arrangement with US and Japan, US South Korea, US Australia, US Philippines, US Thailand. Japan's close ties with America is very, very with such a contrast. We attacked the Pearl Harbor in 1941. They say they started the war. And we are enemies during the World War II. But now we are one of the best allies, best friends. We maintain almost 40,000 of American soldiers in Japan, as many of you know. We support their expenditure, financial support to the cost of those American soldiers in Okinawa, in other parts of Japan. Japan's economic success, as you probably hear, is very remarkable, but it was done because of the support from the other world. We are as hardworking as Chinese, Koreans, Indians, but support from other countries were crucial for our economic development in the initial stage, I believe. China, we are very close neighbors. Economically, China is our important economic partner. As you know, already in 29, China surpassed our economic weight. And now China is catching up with America. Japanese economic is lagging behind. China is now number 2 in economic weight. Japan is number 2. I want to give you some concrete statistics. Our society is a car society. The number of automobile sale in the world. About 30 million cars are sold in China. In America, a little bit more than half, 18 million. In Japan, 5 million. The number of China's GDP, more than 2.6 times of Japan now. The trade export of China is more than 200 times of Japan. The Shanghai port is the largest port in the world that deals with the volume. Many of the Chinese port is one of the top 10. China's economic development is very remarkable, and I was the one who involved with the China's accession to WTO negotiations, and I really welcome what China has done after joining World Trade Organization. I think we share common interest like other Asian countries. Free and fair trade is very, very important for world economy and development of the stability in this area. We are certainly concerned about Trump new measures took place a few weeks ago. China and Japan, together with other colleagues, we are talking about how we should deal with it. And of course, Prime Minister is talking to President Trump during his visit to Florida. But I want to also share with some of the important developments that China is bringing. We are watching very carefully about the recent military spending growth of China. Right now, China's military expenditure is $150 billion. For the last 10 years, it became 3 times. And now equivalent to Japan and UK and France combined, and 1/3 of US. I just want to share also that we are a little bit concerned about what they are doing on military in South China Sea and other part in the Asia. As I said, this is the India-Asia-Pacific era, and keeping the sea lane as accessible as to anybody is very, very important, I believe. It's an important principle of international law, as well as important to maintain the economic growth. This is very, very crucial to the stability and safety of this region. That's about a bigger picture, and I want to comment one thing about Japan, Ukraine. This year, we eased some visa procedures, so we really like to welcome more Ukrainians to visit Japan. Now, Slava Bakauchuk is in Japan, together with his wife. I think right now only 5,000 Japanese come to Ukraine and 5,000 go to Japan. We really hope that more Ukrainians, including Ukrainian students, have a chance to go to Japan and see Japan is like. Some people say Japan is a different space, very crowded, and sushi, sake, and Japanese garden, but also they have very interesting things to see. I would like to finish my presentation saying I think Ukraine can look towards Asia, and the opportunities and possibilities are there, and it's up to you to take advantage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Michio, for this wonderful presentation. And again, it looks like that it's up for Ukraine and Ukrainian society to use these advantages, which Asia really is ready to give us with respect, of course, to mutually beneficial cooperation. Thank you very much. The next presentation goes to Sheikh Ahmed Tamim, Mufti of Ukraine, head of the religion administration of Ukrainian Muslims, with the presentation of the role of Ukrainian Muslims in Asian-Ukrainian relations.
Please excuse me if you will find some mistake, because usually I don't speak English. Thank you very much again. The Islamic administration of the Muslims in Ukraine, that's the representative of all the Muslims community, and our community that's from the different nationality, from the Far East to the Middle East, like Ukrainian citizen. We can find the Indian people from Pakistan, from Bangladesh, from Afghanistan, from the CIS, from the Middle East, but we are here all together like Muslim community, and our administration, that's a member of the All Ukrainian Council for the Churches and the Religion Organizations. Our population, that's about 5% or some more than 2 million Muslims in Ukraine. And we have our Islamic University. We try to prepare our imams and teach them in European places. And we try to develop our relation with everybody. We have good relation with all the religion organization and the churches. And we have our media and radio, internet, and we work all together to give good impression about Islam, about the East, and we ask many popular people and leaders and businessmen about the relation with the East. And many times I repeat the same word. Ukrainian look to the West, and the West look to East. Why we don't look to East directly? And that's very important for Ukraine, to make good relation with the East. And about the Western, to make a good relation with the East. And we know that that's very important for Ukraine, like the center of Europe, and a very important strategic place to be the bridge between the West and the East. And we visited many countries, and anywhere we try to be the good representative of the Ukrainian people and speak about our position. Like Muslims, we are against the terrorism, extremism, and we have good relation with many countries. In April, I visited India and Bangladesh and Kazakhstan, and we have good relation with everybody. We have relation with the Islamic universities in these countries. We visited also in 2008 India to participate the international conference, terrorism, national and international. And anywhere we try to explain about the importance to make good relation with Ukraine. Some difficulty now in Ukraine, but that's not the problem to refuse to develop and make a progress relation with Ukraine. Ukraine need the East, and we are interested to see the Eastern investment in Ukraine, and to explain the Ukrainian businessmen to have some investment also in the East. That's our relation with everybody. We have relation not only with the Muslim community. We visited South Korea also for the international conference 4 years before, and we try to explain everybody about the interest in Ukraine and to develop our relation. About our administration, we have representatives in different ministries here in Ukraine, and we try with all the confessions and the religion organization to visit different countries altogether to give a good presentation about the relation and the good dialogue between the representatives of different religions in Ukraine. I ask everybody to help to develop our relation, to introduce the East more than today. I have relation with all the embassy, and we see like some Slavian people try to make some demonstration like West Eastern people, like dance and music and others. Maybe that will help to give more impression about the East. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this presentation. Again, it's very important for us to have also spiritual leaders for the religion, which is of course of importance for the Asian region. Dear colleagues, before passing the floor to another important presentation, His Excellency Mr. Ambassador of India has prepared his speech printed out in copies, so you can pick them up if you're interested in with his respected colleague. So if you're interested in printed version of Mr. Ambassador's speech, you can pick them up here freely, openly, in any moment you would like to do that. Thank you. And now the floor is passed to Dr. Zhang Yang Lu from the Institute of Russian, East European and Central Asian Studies from Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, with a presentation titled Ukraine and its relations with China from the perspective of Chinese scholars. Please.
Good morning. My name is Zhang Yan Lu from CASS. At first, please permit me to express warm thanks to our organizer of conference, Institute of International Relations of Tarasa Shevchenko National University of Kyiv. The title of my presentation is Ukraine and its relations with China from perspective of Chinese scholars. It contains 4 contents. They are the status of Ukraine studies in China, Ukraine in the eyes of Chinese scholars, Sino-Ukraine relations, and Ukraine and the Belt and Road Initiative. What about the studies of Ukraine in China? In China, there is a Ukraine study boom in the recent years. And the light can be known from 3 aspects. First, the results of Ukraine studies have increased faster and steadily. On Chinese Logic Academic Search website, China Knowledge Network, there are 11,070 relevant documents, which can be found by searching with Ukraine as a keyword. Second, the Chinese Academic Institute, which engage in Ukraine studies, has a high level, and the number of them is increasing constantly. The Chinese Academic of Social Science is the highest academic institute and the comprehensive research center of China. In the field of the philosophy and the social science, and is a subsidiary Institute of Russian, East European, and Central Asia Studies is the most authoritative institute for Ukrainian studies in China, which compiled one of the earliest Ukrainian-Chinese dictionary and published a lot of academic works and articles, such as Guide to the World States, Ukraine, Yarns in Smoke of Gunpowder, and so on. In the past decade, many Chinese universities and other institutes have joined the rank of the Ukraine studies established relevant research centers or departments. Third, the fields of Ukraine studies in China are comprehensive. The Ukraine studies in China are not limited to the politics and economic of Ukraine, but also involve many other areas such as culture, technology, education, and so on. The status of Ukrainian studies in China proves from one aspect light. China attaches importance to Ukraine, and Ukraine is an important partner of China in the Eastern Europe. And what is Ukraine like in China? In the eyes of Chinese scholars, Ukraine is a country which has a wide space and a solid foundation for development. Ukraine has good conditions to develop modern agriculture, deep water, and North Foreign port to develop the international shipping industry. And Ukraine has also a good industrial basic, advanced technologies, rich culture, researches, high level of national education, and so on. Regarding the relationship between China and Ukraine, Chinese scholars believe that relationship between two countries has been always stable and friendly. In the future of the broad spectrum of cooperation and the frame of the Belt and Road Initiative will be even broader. Between China and Ukraine, there is a stable political relations. According to the research, the connection between two countries can be traced back to the Kyiv rules period. And after collapse of the Soviet Union, China was one of the first countries to establish diplomatic relations with Ukraine. In 2001, two countries established a comprehensive, friendly, and cooperative relations. In 2011, upgrade to the strategic partnership. At the same time, Sino-Ukrainian economic cooperation reached the fruitful achievements and shows strong potential for deepening. Ukraine is an important bridge for East-West communication. As early as the second half of the 19th century, although South Ukraine has become an important pivot in the trading route between China and Europe. Now, China has become the second large trade partner, the second large export destination country of Ukraine, and Ukraine is the third large trade partner of China in the CIS region. Ukrainian agriculture export to China has increased significantly, which is an important highlight of economic and trade cooperation between two countries. And now, Ukraine has exceeded the United States and became China's largest sold country of imports for maize. Some cooperation project is in the area of high technology, energy, and infrastructure are steadily promoted. And now the total amount of investment and infrastructure agreement between Chinese and Ukrainian companies have exceeded $6 billion. In the field of the military industry, Sino-Ukrainian cooperation has even achieved a historic breakthrough, jointly invested to build a national aerodynamic industry base in Chongqing of China. Except that, humanistic cooperation between China and Ukraine continue heat up and reach a lot of the achievement. About Ukraine and the Belt and Road Initiative, Chinese scholars believe that the advantage of China and Ukraine are clearly complementary, and there is a wide space for cooperation under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative. President Xi Jinping pointed out at the BRF, which was held in May 2017, that China will enhance friendship and cooperation with all countries involved in the Belt and Road Initiative on the basis of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence. We are ready to show pretext of development with other countries, but we have no intention to interfere in other countries' internal affairs, export our own social system and model of development, or impose our own view on others. In pursuing the Belt and Road Initiative, we will not resort to outdated geopolitical maneuvering. What we hope to achieve is a new model of win-win cooperation. We have no intention to form a small group detrimental to stability. We hope to create it is a big family of harmonious coexistence. The Belt and Road Initiative seeks to jointly build an economic cooperation framework for Eurasia through deepening cooperation potential with the country along the route. It tries to break through geographical restrictions through political coordination, financial integration, and people-to-people exchange. Chinese scholars believe that China and Ukraine can realize the integration interests under the framework of the Belt and Road Initiative, and jointly create opportunity for development for advantageous complementary, so as to achieve win-win cooperation. This is my whole presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Doctor, for this emphasis on Ukraine-China relations, and in particular on the possibilities and advantages which can be taken out, again, mutually beneficially for our two states. The floor goes to Professor Sheshadri Chari, a member of the Governing Council of the Research and Information System for Developing Countries in India, with the presentation named Emergency Trends in India-Ukraine Relations, Major Convergences and Reflections.
Thank you, Chair, and my greetings to His Excellencies, professors, the teaching community, and the students here. We have progressed well into the subject of interests of Ukraine in Asia. As earlier speakers have also pointed out, the importance of Asia, the emergence of Asia in geopolitics. As we all know, India and Ukraine have very close historic and political and economic developments. Ukraine, we all know, attained independence on August 24, 1991. As an independent sovereign country, Ukraine began the process of initiating and developing diplomatic relations with all leading nations of the world. In fact, from 1991 to 2017, Ukraine has established its diplomatic missions and consular relations with more than 175 countries of the world. But at the same time, we all know that the political independence that Ukraine got in 1991 does not mean that Ukraine is a new country. It's an old country with a very, very old, ancient history. And almost 24 years after 1991, Ukraine had to undergo another movement of independence, more popularly known as the Maidan Independence movement in 2014, and then that heralded the second phase of political, economic, and social movement in Ukraine. Similarly, India also attained political independence on 15th August 1947, and in these 75 years, India has established itself as a very leading nation through its strong democratic tradition, which is also now has emerging as the third largest economy of the world and quite a pioneer as far as world peace movement is concerned. As Indian Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi reiterated at the World Economic Forum in Davos very recently, India's growth template is the philosophy that the entire universe is one world, what in Sanskrit we called as Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. World is indeed one family. Both India and Ukraine have a very great role to play in the emerging geopolitical scenario. The socio-political and economic aspects of the world has undergone constant changes, and this transformation has been very rapid in the last 2 centuries. If you see the last 2 centuries of interaction in the world, what started from colonialism and then passed on to the World Wars I and II, the economic progress that the world has made has been really very remarkable. And more importantly, in this economic progress, the role of technology has been again very important. If you all know, when steam engine was invented, we thought that that is the last and final invention that human mind could probably make. But today we are talking of artificial intelligence. So from steam engine to artificial intelligence, the global march has been extremely phenomenal. But this phenomenal global march could not have come across all by itself. And all these growth models has been supported by what we call the global solidarity. We all know how economies were built after the World War II. Except for global solidarity, this kind of a growth could not have been achieved. But these efforts have also resulted in not only growth of economies, but also in creating what we call the growth blocks. The economic stratification of countries, like dividing the economies of the world into developed economies, developing economies, underdeveloped economies. Of course, there is a new narrative that we are talking about, which is called the emerging economies. But emerging economies are also not exactly a very good classification as far as these developments are concerned. And with the end of Cold War, another process, like economic progress, another process started. That is called the creation of international institutional arrangements. We all know about the United Nations, but it's not the only organization that was created after the World War. There were so many other institutions. And now we are in the process of observing the 40th anniversary. In 2019, we will be observing the 40th anniversary of Buenos Aires Action Plan. that is called the BAPA, to take stock of the progress on sustainable development goals and also the success of South-South cooperation. As developing economies, both India and Ukraine have a very seminal role to play in forging effective partnership for peace, progress, and prosperity. India's development component, we call it as a development component with 5 pillars of this developing component. One is capacity building, second is trade and investment, third is development finance, fourth is grants, and the fifth is the technology cooperation. And Ukraine's development component also has 4 pillars: uninterrupted economic reform, effective diplomacy without compromise, defense cooperation, and political stability. If we very deeply see the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement of Ukraine allows European Union access to European Union single market, but in the bargain, the political establishment had to also be prepared for substantial policy reforms. So there could not have been a greater economic engagement without actually undertaking policy reforms. So if you look at the progress of Ukraine's economy, we can see that Ukraine has actually proved that policy reforms and economic growth can be possible, made possible under very challenging circumstances. If you look at the development since 2014, in real economic terms, there has been tremendous growth. Basic macroeconomic stability has been achieved. Inflation also has eased to some extent, and reduced budgetary spending has been another hallmark of Ukraine in these 2 years. Tax structure has been rationalized, and all these things has happened, but institutional mechanism needs to be strengthened further. India's economic situation, if you see, is more or less, India is in a similar situation. Indian economy heavily depends on a robust rural and agricultural growth, more than probably in the industrial growth and service sector. Almost 52% of India's GDP was contributed by service industry in the last 10 years, but in the last 3 or 4 years, Indian economy is again slowly moving towards strengthening the rural and agricultural inputs. So more budgetary allocation for agriculture is being made in India, just as Ukraine is also looking into developing the agricultural strength of the country. In spite of all these things, what we are seeing is that there are again a number of impediments that come in the way of economic growth, and this economic growth is not possible unless we undertake structural policy economic reforms and tweaking of the tax policy. So both for India and Ukraine, national economy is very important, but not enough to set a long-term goal. We need to recognize the fact that we have a responsibility to develop not as growth islands, but aim towards collective and sustainable growth through effective bilateral and multilateral partnerships. India and Ukraine have the potential to emerge as important links in connecting and the development of Eurasia. The next few decades of this century is almost going to be what we call the Asian century. And the signals of this Asian centuries have already begun. If you look at the growth potential and the growth history, the growth, economic growth from the West has shifted to the East. The beginning of this economic growth shifting from West to East was actually signaled by the phenomenal growth that Japan made in the beginning, few decades back. But along with the growth of the phenomenal growth that Japan made, there was growth of South Korea. Taiwan came to be recognized as one of the most important growth areas. And then we also know about the Southeast Asian countries, what we call the Asian tigers. Of course, the Asian tigers growth was there, but it also had a little bit of setback. And the most recent manifestation of marvelous economic growth and reallocation of the economic power from the West to East is, of course, China, which has made phenomenal growth and almost a double-digit growth. And this has also displaced Japan as the second largest economy of the world. Now it is China, which is the second largest economy, and India is closely catching up with China and turning out to be the third largest economic growth potential of the world. But if you see the first four major economies of the world, one is in the West. The rest of the three major economies have shifted to the East. So that shows the importance of East, the importance of Asia, and also the importance of Eurasia to develop as a single economic growth engine model through bilateral and multilateral institutional arrangements. But in spite of this phenomenal growth in increase in trade, economic development, it needs to be noted that Asia is not a single political entity. And Asia does not have a single economic entity like the European Union. And in spite of being a contiguous geography, Asia does not really have what we call a continuity or a commonality as far as forms of government are concerned, as far as religion is concerned, as far as economic stability is concerned, and as far as political formulations are concerned. Every country in Asia has a different political setup, from democracy to dictatorship, from military rule to a little bit of oligarchy. You will find all types of political establishment in Asia, although it's a contiguous terrain. But in spite of this contiguous terrain and difference in political and social and religious and economic entities, there is a potential to grow as a single unit because of not only institutions that have come up in Asia, but also because of the growth potential and demographic dividend that even earlier speakers have said about. So a regional approach will probably provide the most feasible solution to all our problems. And such an approach, a regional approach, can be applied in foreign policy strategy also, and also in economic strategy, without, of course, compromising with the respective countries' military strategy. As we all know and we have realized, the world is slowly becoming a very integrated and multipolar. It's not a unipolar world anymore, it is not a bipolar world anymore, it is a multipolar world. In particular, the dynamism of emerging economies in many developing countries in recent years has sparked a shift in economic power. So, with this rise of South and South-South cooperation, it is becoming more important for these countries to come together and grow together and not grow as individual economies. If we see the Indian growth, what we are seeing is not only one of the most important growth models, but we have also moved a long way since independence from what we call the non-aligned movement. There was a non-aligned summit and the non-aligned movement. From non-aligned, we moved to South-South cooperation, and from South-South cooperation, we have moved to a different level of growth model through institutional working. So with this kind of a progress, we envisage that India should be able to attain as much as 7 to 8% GDP growth. So from that perspective, the strength of these two economies, the economy of India and the economy of Ukraine, have shown a lot of interest. And the strength of both the countries, India and Ukraine, is in its size. Ukraine, if you see, is one of the largest country in this part of the world. India is one of the largest country in the Asian map. We both have past experience. We have a good continuity of policy. Both the countries, India and Ukraine, believe in benign and non-interventionist policy. India had signaled this in its Panchashil program, which was accepted almost 51 years back, and all the countries of Asia, including China, India, are part of this Panchashil, which basically means being benign, growth without intervention. And this kind of restructuring we will have to think of, and when we think of this restructuring, we may have to factor in the growth models that have been talked about, not only by the United Nations in the form of Millennium Development Goals and now the Sustainable Development Goals, but also the growth model that has been in the discussion with BRICS. We also have the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. We will have to work with all these institutions. So both India and Ukraine have an ancient historic background with deep roots in civilizational ethos, and yet very modern and committed to peace, regional development, and bilateral national interest. We have to strengthen the existing regional mechanism. There are a number of mechanisms, and these mechanisms will have to carry forward without making compromise with our respective sovereignty. We have to be part of these global mechanisms, global institutions, but at the same time, we cannot compromise with our respective sovereignty and territorial integrity, which is very important for Ukraine and India. Our strength lies in working together and growing together. The existing institutions and like the RCEP and other institutions are very important. So we have to grow along with this, and India and Ukraine will have to make a realistic assessment of the situation that is existing today on the basis of the experience of the past. And we have to weigh the pros and cons of all these mechanisms and simultaneously engage in promoting a commonly acceptable alternative to the present ones, so that both Eurasia, Indo-Pacific, and Asia can grow together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Chari, again for making this notion about Indian and Ukrainian cooperation. We have a big honor now to pass the floor to our honorable guest, our colleague, actually, honorable colleague, His Excellency Dr. Serhiy Korsunsky, Director of the Hennady Udavenko Diplomatic Academy of Ukraine, with a presentation named Global and Regional Implications of the One Belt, One Road Initiative.
Your Excellencies, dear colleagues, thank you so much. In January 2017, approximately 15 months ago, the chairman of Chinese People's Republic, Xi Jinping, visited Davos for the first time ever. Quite unexpectedly, for some observers, he presented a vision of a globalized world, the thing that previously has been prerogative of the leaders of the West. But for those who followed the Chinese policy for the last 5 years, it was not a surprise at all. Since 2013, China has been working persistently over development of probably the biggest and most comprehensive initiative ever, which is called One Belt, One Road, with more than 70 countries involved and at least $1 trillion of investment envisioned. That's initiative. When we talk about it, you have to understand that we talk about 70% of population of the humankind and more than 35% of GDP. This initiative is designed to connect China and other countries in the Southeast Asia with European markets. Inland and sea transportation, ports, logistic facilities will be built along the Belt and Road transport corridors. One Belt, One Road has become, later in 2017, as an integral part of the most important conceptual document of Chinese government. It is difficult to overestimate the importance of this initiative for the regional and global development. Just in Central Europe, 16 countries are already united with China in 16+1 initiative, which was put forward on the level of governments and presidents. It has already brought billions of investment and dozens of important projects in infrastructure. If we go to our neighbors from Serbia to Bulgaria to Romania, we will see the physical examples of how this initiative works. It is a very crucial activity for Pakistan and dozens of countries in Africa, and it's important for Greece and Serbia, for Britain and Austria. And if you look at the schedule of foreign visits to China in recent times, you will see big delegation from European Union countries with hundreds of business people coming and talking to Chinese companies and banks about investment and common projects. On the global stage, China has challenged the United States hegemony in South America too, and Russian and American and Turkish interests in Africa, Russian presence in Central Asia. China has expressed interest in building trade routes through Arctics, and as far as I know, very soon China will begin construction of the fleet which will be working in northern seas. This initiative is very important for Ukraine too. We have last year visit of the first deputy prime minister to Ukraine, and we are talking about now about $7 billion of investments in different projects and infrastructure, and Chinese companies have already won several tenders for port development, gas extraction, and road constructions. But I have to mention as well that not everybody happy with this initiative, and if you read carefully the publications in most important magazines and through think tanks around Europe, you will see that some scholars and experts argue that all those projects and all those developments are going to promote only Chinese interests in the region, and the China goal is to suck all the resources from the third world to consume for the sake of development of China. As well, it's very interesting because very recently I saw the very comprehensive article, if I'm not mistaken, it was Washington Post, published by a group of researchers, American researchers, who argue quite the opposite. They went to Africa, to countries where China already built infrastructure and hospitals and roads, and the outcome of those investments were stunning development of those African countries. And they argue that before you blame China, you have to carefully check vis-a-vis real examples of those investments and those projects. So I think that Ukraine is not in a position to question that. We have to use this opportunity because we do need investment, we do need infrastructure. Later on in this conference we will talk in more detail, so I don't want to develop on this, but I think I would support the advantages of our cooperation that could be brought by One Belt, One Road initiatives. As well, I would like to mention as well that we as Diplomatic Academy are doing our small contribution to development of relations with Asian countries. Last year, we were blessed with visits from high-level delegation from South Korea and Japan. This year, I'm going to visit China and Singapore, and definitely, probably, the Pakistanis will be the next one. So we are trying, just for you as colleagues, you must understand that we are doing our best to build relations with the countries in the region in common understanding of how diplomacy works, how academia to academia can contribute to this development. And I do think that the efforts of this institute are very important, and we will be working together for future cooperation and development of relations with Asia. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for this presentation and for again talking about how important the relations with Asian countries are, and in particular how China becomes one of the main Ukrainian partner in trade and investment sphere. And maybe to continue this issue of Ukrainian-Chinese relations, it's a big honor and pleasure to pass the floor to Ms. Zhang Wei from the Embassy of People's Republic of China, a counselor, no, it's okay, with, again, stressing on Ukrainian and Chinese relations. Please, Ms. Zhang Wei.
Мій виступ короткий я підготувала українською мовою, але я знаю, що серед моїх колег теж є дуже добрий спеціаліст. Українська мова дуже гарна, я дуже люблю. Якщо дозволите, тоді маленьку репліку щодо питання Тайвань. Так, Китай має це питання, і ми маємо вирішувати. Але це питання не буде питанням між Китаєм та іншими країнами. Ми впевнені, що ми це питання вирішуємо самі. Так, дякую. Шановний пане Антоне, дякую за запрошення. Для мене це велика честь. І, пані Олено, дякую за допомогу. Шановні вчені, учасники конференції, колеги, любі студенти, доброго дня. Як пан директор сказав, що ми зараз мешкаємо епоху глобалізації. І люди різних країн, різних національностей можуть спілкуватися за допомогою інтернету. І в прекрасному Києві ми можемо спробувати корейську, японську, китайську, індійську страви, і дійсно грецьку, французьку кухні, а також Макдональдс і KFC. І цього року, як ви знаєте, під час китайського Нового року Український філармонічний оркестр, користуючи мовою музики, підкорив серця китайських шанувальників, які зовсім не знають української мови. А минулого місяця китайський диригент пан Фан Тао спрацював з українським оркестром. Виступ тут був в філармонії, вийшов майстерним, а позитивні відгуки хвилею лунають і досі. Це епоха розвитку. Завдяки поняттям спільного користування жити та працювати стало набагато і зручніше, і проще. Будь ласка, підійміть руку, хто зараз не користується соціальними мережами. Молодець. Так. За допомогою сучасних інформаційних технологій підвищується ефективність, а інноваційний простір для стартапів дедалі розширюється. Це епоха молодих людей. Сьогодні тут присутні багато студентів, і в процесі створення вашого майбутнього власного бізнесу має бути, мабуть, дуже багато труднощів. Це не буде простий такий шлях, але ви маєте винятково сприятливі умови. і для вас рідкісні можливості, набагато більше, ніж ваші батьки, коли вони були молодими, як ви. І вам пощастило. І це епоха, що потужною хвилею наповнює нас ентузіазмом. Що нам робити? Я, як дипломат, який працює зараз в Україні, що я маю робити? Майже тиждень тому, 12 числа, відправився у дорогу вантажний поїзд з китайського міста Ченду, коли панда дуже гарна, і до австрійської столиці Відня. Загальна відстань 9800 кілометрів. За попередніми розрахунками 25 числа цього місяця цей потяг має бути до місця призначення. І цей поїзд буде проходити через Київ. Тобто Україна – це обов'язкова зупинка на шляху «Один пояс, один шлях». Я можу навести ще один приклад. І у листопаді цього року в Шанхаї буде проводитися перше експо імпорту Китаю. На сьогоднішній день більше ніж 50 українських підприємств зареєструвалися для участі. І ще один приклад. Зараз у Китаї на нашому ринку 90% масла від України. Я можу сказати багато прикладів, що підтверджують наступні 3 точки зору. Перше. На сьогоднішній день Україна використовує свої геополітичні переваги та розкриває величезний потенціал. Усіма силами заліковує рани, отримані від війни, та вже вступила на шлях розвитку. Друге. На сьогоднішній момент Україна завойовує ринок Азії, звісно, включаючи і Китай. А двері Китаю відкриті для України. Китайська сторона з широкими обіймами вітає співпрацю з Україною. Третє. Національна культура України дуже багата, і вона налічує довгу історію. І український народ працьовитий та розумний, гаряче любить миру. Творчі сили українців отримали сильний поштовх, а Азія – це місце найшвидшого розвитку у всьому світі, яке справді потребує Україну, що як житницю Європи, як сильну металургійну базу, як країну, команду IT-спеціалістів, як колиску слов'янської культури. Дійсно, Україна зараз знаходиться у стані війни. Я знаю, що багато людей, включаючи американського президента Трампа, захоплюються мистецтвом війни Суньцзи, але вони зовсім не розуміють, що найкраще для Суньцзи. Як перемогти? Це одержати перемогу не війною, а мирним шляхом. Лише український народ сам може допомогти Україні вийти з тіні війни. Азії, в тому числі Китай, що мають потрібні для України інвестиції та ринок. Азіатський народ має такі ж самі сподівання, що український народ, а саме покращити умови життя, жити та працювати у спокої, спільно розвиватися та спільно будувати загальнолюдську спільноту єдиної долі. У 2017 році внесок розвиток економіки Китаю у світову економіку склав 34%. Як Україна має бути відсутньою у процесі покрокової реалізації концепції «Один пояс, один шлях». Я хочу користуватися цією нагодою, ще раз подякувати організатору сьогоднішньої конференції Інституту міжнародних відносин Національного університету Shevchenko і те, що ми зараз зібралися разом тут, означає, що Україна приділяє велике значення розвитку співробітництва з країнами Азії. А ми також приділяємо велику увагу співпрацю з Україною. Ми рахуємося на зустріч один одному, реалізуємо зараз з вами принципи спільної побудувати, спільного використання та спільної заможності. Я впевнена в майбутньому України, а також в розвитку відносин стратегічного партнерства між Китаєм та Україною. Дякую за увагу.
Дуже дякуємо пані Женгвей за прекрасну доповідь, за просто блискучу українську мову. Many thanks for this presentation, really, regarding the Ukrainian-Chinese relations. And now, dear colleagues, we will have the last but not least presentation in the first panel. And we are coming back to academic circles. And it's a big pleasure for us to invite to floor Professor Olga Butkevich, who is a professor of the Department of International Law of our institute and our university, who is a vice president of the Ukrainian Association of International Law. And this last but not least presentation in the first session will be devoted to peculiarities of Asian approaches to international law.
Thank you very much. First of all, speaking about Ukrainian interests in Asia as well as about Asian interests in Ukraine, we should bear in mind that all our correlationships and our relationships are based mainly on international law and international legal principles. While defining our relations and Ukrainian interests, we should know that, and it is essential to remember that there is no unique, identical approach to international law in this region. Asia, unlike other regions and like other continents, Asia is different. Asia has many different approaches to international law. And like any other region, more or less homogeneous Europe, Americas, Arab world, or to a lesser extent Africa, there is no unique approach to international law in Asia. Let me quote the words from the inaugural editorial introduction to the first issue of the Asian Journal of International Law, where it was said that there is of course no monolithic Asian understanding of international law and its institutions. According to Jawaharlal Nehru, Asia is a huge continent and the peoples of Asia are all different from one another as they were reared in different cultures and traditions. And there is no one Asian way because Asia offering different viewpoints. As we can mention, as we can see, European consensus in different domains of international law. First of all, European consensus in the domain of human rights protection in the framework of the Council of Europe, more or less homogeneous European Union, and here we may see European consensus in different spheres such as, besides human rights protections, these are legal protection, social health, social and state security, economics, environmental issues, and many, many other issues, as well as judicial cooperation and cooperation in legal issues. There is no such consensus in Asian region. That is natural due to the whole historic development of this region and its peculiarities. Here we may identify at least 4 distinctive understandings of international law in Asia according to sub-regions of this continent. These are Sinocentric international law, that is international legal tradition under the impact of Confucianism and Taoism. Then it is Buddhist Hindu approach to international law based on Dharma and based on Hinduism and Buddhism. Then we may mention Japanese view to international law, which began to distinguish itself from 17th century onward. And in addition to these native Asian approaches, also there is 4th approach, Islamic approach, which spreads in the region and is ponderable in different countries of this region also. Such diversity is the reason for a relative late formation of the Regional Asian Society of International Law. It was created in 2007, as well as other local interstate or civil lawmaking and law interpretative or law enforcement entities and institutions. Albeit the Society for the Development of International Law in Asia was founded in 1989, and also some national societies of international law existed in India, Japan, Korea, and Philippines. To compare, European Ghent Institute of International Law was created in 1873, American Society was founded in 1907, and European Society of International Law was created in 2001 on the initiative of the editors of the European Journal of International Law, which traces its history also back to 1990. So dealing with the international legal concept of this region, we should bear in mind that Asia is different. Another point is European versus Asian approaches to international law. We should mention that up to our time, international law was developed on European basis, and this Eurocentric approach is, we may find this Eurocentric approach even today. For example, even UN Charter mentioned out-of-date wording of civilized nations, which was traditionally developed in during the classical period of international law of 19th century. To combat this Eurocentricity, to combat Eurocentric approach, I would say Eurocentric and European Christian approach to international law and its values, we should be based on that notion which was elaborated by Japanese professor of international law, Professor Onuma, who proposed his approach to international law, trans-civilizational approach, trans-civilizational approach to international law, and trans-civilizational approach to international lawmaking. When we are speaking about Asian contribution to international law, here there are also 3 or 4 main ways of Asian approach. Hindu civilization gave us principle of non-violence. Here we may mention edicts of King Ashoka, laws of Manu, and humanization of war. Also, Hindu civilization gave us cosmopolitanism, hospitality to strangers, status of foreigners, etc. Confucian or Sinocentric approach proposed principle of non-violence, and colleague just mentioned about Sun Tzu approach of good wars. Good war, according to Sun Tzu, means that there is war without blood, that there is war without violence. Japanese approach gave original and specific view to the equality of international relations, justice, and reciprocity. In general, Asian contribution to international law is often regarded in such fields as maritime law. According to Professor Anand, freedom of seas is one of the principles which Europe acquired from Asia through Grotius. Humanization of war is another field, and here we may also refer to Confucianism, Taoism, laws of Manu, Muslim approaches of humanization of international law. Then it is international environmental law, and an Asian view on the unity of all living. And also these are some separate institutes of international law, such as Indian tradition in international legal recognition, succession of states, diplomatic protocol, diplomatic ranks, China's approach to summits of head of states, which were founded as early as in ancient and early medieval China, and some specific means of dispute settlement, and etc. Today, Asia and Asian international law tries to unify itself. Despite controversies between main Asian approaches to international law, anti-colonial struggle of many of Asian states caused unifying tendencies among them. Anti-colonial and uniting movements contributed to the idea of the foundation of all Asian entities in the field of international law also. Asian institutions in the domain of international law activated their publishing activity. For example, Society for the Development of International Law in Asia publishes the Asian Yearbook of International Law. Asian Society of International Law founded Asian Journal of International Law in 2011. There are rather authoritative and classic modern Chinese Journal of International Law and East Asian Journal of International Law. Other journals are publishing or have existed for some time. These are Asian Yearbook of International Law, Japanese, Singapore, Indian yearbooks and journals of international law, etc. In general, there is a tendency for strengthening of the all Asian centers of studying, developing of international law and implementation of international law. And this tendency in this process is based on both principles. The first is use and applying of universal or other regional Asian achievements in the field of international law, and second is preservation and respect for its original local approach to this law. I think that these two principles of lawmaking and approach to international law should be also bared by Ukraine and by our movement to international law and to international legal settlement of our own problems. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Butkevich, and I think it's very important for us to understand that yes, here in Ukraine we deem that international law is mainly European, Christian one, but yes, in other regions, in particular in Asia, Asian history and Asian tradition of international law is very, very huge and very important, very interesting. Thank you very much once again. Dear colleagues, now we have a pause for a coffee break. Our charming colleagues will help you to find the space for it. And then we welcome all of you for the panel discussion too. Thank you very much for a very fruitful panel discussion one.